911 turbos don't only crush every drag race they participate in, they also crush depreciation rates. At the moment, all generations are depreciating at low rates, making them financial savvy purchases compared to their competitors. This didn't always used to be the case. Let me show you by starting with the current depreciation rates. We go from new to old. Starting with the 992 split by the base and the S models, we can see that values decreased rapidly in the second half of 2022. But it's basically the complete market that came down with above average rates in this period. In 2023 though, the 992 stabilized. We can see that the depreciation rate decreased. Base models are down by 3.4% and S's by 4.9%. These rates equal to a loss of $7.6 and $12.4 thousand respectively. These are of course averages for all model years. Brand spanking new ones lost a few percentage points more. Furthermore, it's important to take into account that supply for the S models is much larger. This means that the numbers are more reliable. Nevertheless, it's clear that loss rates are lower than before. Between June 2022 and 23, turbos were coming down with rates of 18.2 and 14.9%. Continuing with the 991.2 generation, we can see a similar price pattern. A sharp drop in prices during the second half of 2022 and a stabilization during 2023. Compared to last year, base models are 5.2% cheaper and S's 3.9%. This equals approximately a loss of $8,000 and $7.1 thousand. Similar to the 992 market, supply is the largest in the S market. It provides us therefore with a more reliable estimate of the prices. Going even further back in time, we arrive at the 991.1 generation. The price trend is similar to the one in the .2 market. A big boom during the pandemic and the top in the first half of 2022 and an above average steep decline in the second half of 2022, followed by a more flat development going into 2023. Base models are 5.9% cheaper than 1 year ago, and for S's this is 2.4%. These rates amount to a loss of $7.8 and $3.4 thousand respectively. Note that the S market is again the largest and gives therefore the most reliable estimate. And that brings us to the 996 and 997 generations. The 997 is on the border of being a collectible car, while it can be argued that the 996 is already a collectible car. For both of these generations, the price trends are then also different than for the 992s or 991s. For example, if we look at the 997.2 Turbo S market, we can see that the correction from the pandemic price top was relatively small, and that current prices are only a few $1,000s removed from the top. Last year, S's even increased by 1% or $1.1 thousand, but this change isn't statistically confirmed, meaning that it could be the result of chance. I by the way excluded the base model because the price trend is relatively volatile following low supply. So let's move on to the 997.1 split by the automatic and the manuals. We can see that the price premium for the manuals increased massively during the pandemic and stayed at this elevated level. You need to bring approximately $30,000 more if you want a manual. The manual market itself is a bit smaller than the automatic market, so the price trend is more volatile and more uncertain. Nevertheless, if we look at the price behavior over time, we can see that there's only a marginal drop from the market top in 2022. This is a price characteristic that's only visible for a handful of cars that feature on the channel. Another car that has this price pattern is for example the Ferrari 360. Looking at last year's price change, we can see that manuals lost 3.5% and automatics 3.9%. Very respectable numbers. They amount to $4 and $3.4 thousand respectively. But the change for the automatics isn't confirmed, so it could be the result of chance. And that brings us to the star of the show, the 996 Turbo. In terms of financial savvy purchases, this could be the right pick. I've been advocating for the 996 for a long time. If you're looking for a car with a low depreciation rate that's relatively affordable, I would have a good look at the 996 Turbo. We can see again that prices didn't really came down after mid-2022. They remained at approximately the same level. Normal turbos are up by 3.1%, while cars with the X50 package are up by 1.8%. This amounts to an increase of $2.1 and $1.6 thousand respectively. Both of these changes aren't confirmed, meaning that they could be the result of chance. Especially the X50 market is small, so we need to interpret this trend with care. Supply fluctuates between 3 and 10 cars. Turbo S's are excluded due to the unreliability of the trend. Now let's put all of these numbers in one graph before we move on. We can see now that turbos lost on average 2.5%, but that there are still some differences among the generations. 997.1s, 991s and 992s all lost approximately 4%, while the 997.2 and 996 fall on the other side of the 0 point. It can be questioned if prices really increased in these markets, but it's fair to say that they didn't decrease. Now without any further analysis, I think most people would agree that these rates are low. Approximately 4% on a 3-year-old 992 is impressive, and so is the resilience in the 996 trend. But we of course need to compare these rates to the rest of the market to confirm this. Over here we have the US year-over-year price changes for almost all cars that feature on my channel. On the horizontal axis we have the price change compared to last year in percentages, and on the vertical axis we have the number of cars to which this change applies. The median decrease during last year was 7.4%, and most cars lost between 3 and 13%. So this means that all turbo models outperformed the market average. This is remarkable, especially for the latest models. You see, newer models typically depreciate more and tend to fall on the left-hand side of the average, but with 4.6 and 4.2%, the 991.2 and 992 fall on the right-hand side of the average. The 997.2 and 996 even fall in the top 25% of cars that lost the least. However, when we make this analysis more concrete, the turbo really starts to shine. Let's start with some front-engine GT cars. 2 months ago I uploaded a comparison of various front-engine GT cars, so let's have a look at those results. We have the various models on the horizontal axis and the price change during last year on the vertical axis. First of all, we can see that all cars lost considerably more than the turbo models. With 6.8 and 7.1%, the old Vantages lost the least of this group, but it's still way more than what we can see in the turbo market. Moreover, the differences expand when we look at the newer cars. AMG GT sit at 11.2%, second generation V8 F-Types at 14.9%, Romas at 15%, and 4-liter Vantages at 16.7%. These rates are more than double of the turbo rates. Now in last week's video we compared the mid-engine Ferrari market to other mid-engine cars. Let's now also include the turbo in that comparison. Will that change things? Not really. We can see that old Ferraris like the F355, 360, F430 and 458 lost between 0.7 and 4.4%. So the 360 and F355 lost approximately the same as the 997.2 and 996 turbo. The other models are more in line with the rest of the turbo market, but are much older than the 991 or 992 generation. If we look at the more modern stuff, like the GT, Artura, NSX or even R8, we can see that all those cars lost way more than any of the turbos. Let's wrap up and conclude. If you're a value-conscious buyer shopping in this segment, there's no way around the 911 Turbo. It's a financial savvy purchase because the depreciation rates are among the lowest ones. We saw that prices for the oldest generations have been proven to be resilient to the market correction in the second half of 2022 and also remained stable during last year. However, it's the depreciation rate for the latest generations that really impresses. 991s and 992s lost between 4 and 5%. Brand new cars lost a bit more, but overall these are still impressive rates that are lower than for any of its competitors. 3 months ago I already flagged that rates are decreasing, and this seems to hold for now. But of course, it can change in the future. We saw that 991 and 992 prices took a little nosedive when the complete market corrected. But at the moment, there are no concrete signs in the data that point towards a massive increase in depreciation. And with that we arrive at the end of this video. Now if you enjoy this data-driven way of analyzing car prices, but would like to see a video for a different car, head over to my channel. Over there you'll find data-driven market updates for a large variety of cars. Can't find the car you're looking for? Let me know the name of the car by commenting it down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.